Welcome to this Economic Times and ETHR World session. I have today a very prominent and rather unusual panel of CFOs and CHROs. Normally, you always find CEOs and CFOs together or CEOs and CHROs together. But today we have two major functions together. And before I go into inviting the speakers, what I would like to do is set a format. Each one of us will share for 2-3 minutes our main thoughts. And then we'll go into interactive question answer session. And then if there are any questions from the audience, we'll take it on a chat box so that there will be enough opportunity to exchange views. So let me first of all welcome each of my panel members. Manish Dugar, CFO Mphasis, Manish Sinha, CHRO, Mahindra and Mahindra Auto Business, Vinod Jain, CFO Cadila, and Priyank Parakh, GSK, HR Head, and Sandeep Batra, CFO Crompton Greaves. So welcome to the panel. The topic that ETHR World chose is very relevant, especially in today's time, because these two functions, HR and finance, have played a very major role in helping CEOs strategize. I'm not saying marketing and production, etc., don't play an equal role. They all play equal role. But if you look at the role of these two functions vis-a-vis closeness to the CEO in implementing change, implementing a new strategy, or handling crisis. And I think the COVID crisis has given that very big opportunity to both the functions to bring forth their expertise in advising the organization on how to handle very major decisions which were really out of the turn, but at the same time required for the organization. In my view, normally, and having had some 48 years of experience with Unilever, Motorola, Shell, and IBM, and I'm not saying that any function is to be responsible, but normally the HR and the finance functions are not in best of terms. They are like rival siblings in a family. That is what appears in many companies. I'm not saying all. The two functions have different agendas to work upon, and sometimes they don't meet. That's a reality. But where they meet, magic happens. And many companies, this magic happens. And as a result of that, I've seen in my own experience that the collaboration that the two functions can bring together by chatting, by talking, by finding out how to manage within the budget, raise funds, how to take new initiatives, unplanned activities. Is really, they are interdependent. And I don't think any function, whether HR or finance, should think that we have the final authority and we are the people who can say yes or no to the situation. This is my view, and I think the collaboration is going to be one of the biggest things that is difficult to practice because you are judged on what you deliver, not on collaboration. If you don't meet your target, you're judged on that. Your performance is evaluated on that, not on how goody are you with other functions. So there is a contradiction built into this whole scheme of things. So now I'll go off to invite, and let me first introduce Manish Dugar. He's a CFO with Mphasis, 25 years experience, and is a member of the Executive Council at Mphasis, and as a result, an extensive global leadership experience, mergers, acquisitions, strategic planning, you name it. And he has worked in multiple industries. So he brings a rich experience of information technology industry, BPO, FMCG. So Manish, welcome to the session. Can I hand over to you to share your views, sir?
Thank you so much, Dr. Aquil, and my wishes and my welcome to all the other panelists on this panel. It's an interesting conversation, and like you rightly mentioned, over the 25 years, one has seen both kinds of dynamics play out. Fortunately, more the positive ones than the negative ones. In my mind, if we start with the word partnering, partnering is many a times misunderstood by people as just going with whatever one says and just accepting what the other guy is saying. I guess both are very critical functions which represent important organizational priorities, and any one of them underrepresented is actually not right. So it's extremely important in my mind that there is an organizational imperative to consider the value of both these pieces equally. At the same time, it's also important that the leadership that represents these functions also have equality in terms of capability and competence, so that it's not one versus the other. It is not subservient to another, because many a times the leader and the weightage that the organization gives to a function also determines how effective one function is and how effective the other function is not. What is good for an organization is that both perspectives are well understood, well invested in, and is well taken care of, because lack of any and I'm not saying just finance and HR, but actually that's true for all the parts of the organization as a general management perspective. So and different industries have different functions which become important. So when you think of a manufacturing company, it is production and engineering becomes very critical. When you think of IT, let's say digital advertising, which I was part of, high end engineers, data sciences become very, very critical. When you think of Practo like a company, health tech and understanding of health industry is also a critical part in the organization. And then when you go back in time, when I was with Wipro, and then in the IT business first, and then I was running the BPO business, each business has a need to have certain set of priorities represented in the leadership, and each one of them given the due in terms of making sure that there is a balance. Because if that balance is lost, you will very soon find that something or the other is going wrong. I think the interesting thing about HR and finance, which is the topic of today's panel discussion, is that irrespective of which industry, which company you look at, these two are kind of permanent. So, you will have to have a finance function, you will have to have an HR function. And it is important for, the organization dynamics to play out, because there are times when you need a constructive conflict. There are times when it is important that there is a debate, there is a discussion, there is an argument about what should be done. And like you rightly mentioned, there are times when it may be not necessarily completely in the same direction. There could be conflicts, there could be budgetary conflicts, there could be people related conflicts. And as long as there is a in Mphasis, we call it Mphasis first approach, which is to say that we present each perspective, then we take a step back from our functional roles, and then we look at it from a general management perspective. Given we all come with experience of having run businesses, and we understand not just one part but the other part as well, how do you look at what would be the right thing to do from the company's perspective, and be willing to accept something which need not necessarily be 100% in alignment with what a functional priority are. So to speak, move away from functional priority to organizational priority. It is extremely important to understand, that at times, while it may seem like a financially inappropriate decision, but when you take the right choices from a people perspective, it may in the long term actually be the right financial decision as well. So there are conflicts. There will be conflicts. That's the nature of the beast. Ability to find the right decision, keeping organizational priority, in front and not the functional priority. Making sure that it is not based on who has higher say or who has a higher share of voice, based on what will be the right thing to do from a long term and not just a short term. Maturity of the leadership that represents these functions. I think all of these go a long way in getting these two functions to come together and create a 1 + 1 = 11 instead of 1 - 1 = 0. So I think that would be, my perspective, given what I have seen over so many years, and would love to hear, my fellow
Yeah.
panelists on this call.
Manish, you presented a very balanced picture, very balanced. I like the word you used, that constructive conflicts will be there, but
Yeah,
emphasis first, or an
yeah,
organization top. So it's not that people go to CEO as a referee between constructive conflicts, but at the end of the day, and I like the way you use the word, you take a step back and say what's good for organization. In your case, what's good for Emphasis, and that
yes,
wins. And I think that
yeah,
formula is applicable to many other organizations, in fact, all organizations. How well we play it out. So very well thought out, sir. So thank you very much, Manish. And let me
Thank you.
now move to Manish Sinha. Manish Sinha is an HR leader in automotive, energy, FMCG, and pharma background. And he has got an outstanding background of 2 decades and currently leads the HR function at Mahindra Auto Business. On a serious note, can I ask you to share your views, sir? Manish, over to you. Sinha.
So much, Dr. Aquil. And as mentioned by Manish, the other Manish, I think clearly very interesting topic. First of all, thank you so much for having me here and giving me an opportunity to share my perspective. And of course, learn from the other eminent panelists as well. As I see, this is a very interesting subject and extremely topical, especially in times of COVID and even otherwise in normal situations as well. And if I look at a business performance or a business growth, it clearly hinges on, I would say, 4 or 5 important parameters: product, I would say quality, people, reach, capital, and of course the marketing efforts. There are many more as well. And none of this is actually divorced from any other. So, two of the most critical elements, however, are capital allocation and I would say human resource deployment. And in my view, both the CFO and the CHRO are actually two wheels of an aircraft, and both are equally important for the takeoff and landing, and both are equally critical for the journey to be complete and be successful. So, the way I have seen the CFO and the CHRO roles, especially in the current situation, needs to partner all the more, whether it is with respect to fixed cost reduction, the overall cost of structure, we talk about conversion cost, manufacturing efficiency, any parameter which is a business parameter. And I'm not referring to all of these parameters as finance led or finance controlled parameters. These are business parameters where the HR and the CFO both have an equal role to play, and whole host of other benefits, including the salary cost. So if I take this point little forward, the entire spectrum of cost optimization across the enterprise, I would say, has to be jointly led by the CFO and the CHRO. Topics such as productivity ratios, org structure studies, we talk about spanner layers, benchmarking within the organization, benchmarking with other external organizations. They are extremely critical parameters and needs to be discussed jointly by the CFO and the CHRO. Similar to this, other parameters like, say, volume or sales per headcount, manpower cost as a percentage of revenue. What is the level of automation that exists? Where do we want to go? Similarly, what is the level of digitization, outsourcing that is needed in the organization? All of these are, I would say, joint ownership and accountability of the CEO and the CHRO, irrespective of the industry that you are in. There are essentially two ways or two phases of an org cycle. One is a growth phase and the other is a decline phase. And I would not say COVID is a decline phase, but in a way it has put the industry in certain amount of check. If you talk about the growth phase, where are you expanding? So manufacturing footprint expansion or entering new geographies, new markets, all of these are clear signs of growth. And there again, I see the CHRO and the CFO jointly holding the fort, evaluating these decisions, and taking a balanced view between, talent availability, external interferences, labor issues, if it could be there in any geography. So while a proper due diligence has to be done, both for organic and inorganic growth, and I see financial and legal due diligence is mostly done. In many organizations, I have seen cultural and labor related due diligence is not given enough weightage. Where I think you take a decision, you move 5 steps, and then you realize, oh, now we have made a mistake. So then the problems emerge later. And hence, I believe a very sound partnership is needed to manage these issues. While we may say that CEO takes the final call, but if there are two critical advisory functions to the CEO, which help him in taking the decision. It is essentially the CFO and the CHRO. So the finance and the HR function. And I personally believe that all three of them, and if you refer to the McKinsey article, Talent to Value, all the three functions put together, the CEO, the CHRO, and the CFO, can create magic and do create magic in various organizations. So that's my initial thought.
Okay. Thank you, Manish. You brought in a very objective angle. When you say there must be matrix, whether it's a marketing decision or a production decision or reaching the new areas of operations, ratios make a lot of difference. Cost per employee, output per employee, revenue per employee, and that is where finance people help HR people understand the figures and numbers. Now, may I move to Vinod Jain? Vinod Jain has more than 25 years of experience, and today he heads CFO function for Cadila Pharmaceuticals. And actually, amazing how he manages, but his responsibilities includes API business in India and emerging markets, spanning over 100 countries. So, Vinod, welcome to the panel, and may I request you, sir, to share your views, Vinod.
Thank you, Dr. Busrai, and good evening to all my fellow panelist member. And thanks to ETHR World for providing this opportunity to offer my views over here. So, as both Manish has put up that the two capital, the capital and the human capital, right? In any organization, these two capital are very, very important, and they have to function in a complementary manner so as to achieve the organization goal of growth and maximizing the shareholder value. As we know that human capital is one of the most important, but at the same time, it is the largest expenditure on your balance sheet, on your P&L accounts. Hence, it is quite natural that and CHRO, they become the strategic partner to leverage the human capital investment to generate revenue and create the shareholder value. They cannot afford to work in a silo, in tandem with each other. They have to be the part of all the decision making in the organization, so that organization business as well as the financial performance is achieved. We can get the talent in the organization, but it becomes very important for the CHRO that how we can develop this talent to the fullest potentials, and how then it becomes a responsibility that how this human capital can we can leverage upon this human capital to grab the business opportunity. That's how these two functions should work, so that one way we hire the right talent, develop them to their fullest potential, and then see that how this human capital turns our business to the optimum level, to the maximum possible level. Today, both Manish has told that CFO has to ensure that, that there are right kind of capital and resources are allocated to the and at the same time CHRO has to ensure that whatever the human capital they hire, that is appropriate, they are properly engaged, they are developed properly, so that is the potential of human capital for the best of the organizations. I belongs to pharma industry, and pharma, it is one of the highest people-centric after the IT. Whether if we take the R&D, that, it is the backbone of pharma industry. And unless until both this major function ensure that the right kind of talent is there, they are skilled, they are trained properly, it is very difficult to get the success in R&D efforts, and all our investment go futile. So it is very, very important that to realize the investment into the R&D efforts, both the people, both the function, CFO and CHRO, they should collaborate with each other so that we can maximize our R&D efforts and our success.
Thank you, Vinod. You painted a very big picture in the beginning, at the board level, I like the way you brought it down to the clinic of the doctor. And I think that is the type of perspective we need in today. That not only talk at 35,000 feet, but also come down to ground level and say this is how impact of any decision that CHRO and CFO takes together can actually affect even the research
Yes, yes.
output. So I like that point that you very pinpointedly mentioned that even the research output will be influenced by the dynamics between HR and finance functions. So thank you. And your years of experience shows in the brief comment that you made very rich, sir. So now may I now move to an HR expert, Priyank Parakh. Priyank has more than 17 years of experience in human resources, and he heads CHRO for GSK Consumer Healthcare. He is responsible to lead the culture agenda for GSK, which is world famous in terms of its rich culture and the way they've gone through transformation of 3, 4 companies merging together from SmithKline, Beecham to whatnot. So Priyank, over to you, sir, for your comments.
Thank you, Dr. Aquil, and amazing panel we have. What a mix! It's phenomenal. So really looking forward to hear views and have an amazing learning in this session. Thank you so much, ETHR, to bring all of us together and inviting me for this session. So my views, which on the topic, which is very pertinent at this point in time, are like this. So we all have to perform, we all have to deliver as an organization. And most important thing in this VUCA world and these unprecedented times for any organization is one, employees' health and well-being, so that they can be there to deliver. And the second most important, or rather I can't rank them, business continuity and solution-oriented approach. And moreover, because we are in the business of healthcare essential products, it was our responsibility to ensure that our products are always available to patients, consumer, and that is why we ramped up our productions, distribution efforts, and also our focus on the patient and consumer. And during these times, we actually ended up building stronger and agile organization. So net, what really happened is an amazing partnership with all of us, and more pertinent to this topic between finance and HR. Now, my take on this topic is HR and finance need to come to the party even before anybody could think of the party. So they got to be there. And as my colleagues talked about very pertinently, two wheels, and Dr. Akil himself talked about the magic which these two people can create. One thought could be as financial capital provides needed baseline, human potential could be looked through a skyline. So I really love this word called Chitij in Hindi, which means horizon, a distant point where earth and sky seem to meet. I believe HR and finance, if work together, could really define the horizon for the organization. They can work closely with the CEO to foresee the long-term vision and future, and then break into achievable milestone which to the rest of the team look like a horizon. They defined right financial matrix, and my colleagues, my panelists talked about some of those, and governance to keep track of the health of the business and also make right investment on future capabilities and resources to drive the team towards that horizon. Another interesting piece which I experienced in last few years, the new generation CFO is a great HR manager. And I can talk about few of them who have been amazing colleagues and actually better HR manager than some of us being in HR. And CHRO, in this VUCA world, has to have an appreciation of the business environment. Now, why is this whole thing for? It's for performance management system. It's actually for performance of the organization. And CFO does it so diligently, so well, month on month. And the people performance, we actually wait for the annual appraisal to happen or a 6 monthly appraisal. Now, in this interesting times, what really happened is very pertinent. And GSK led the way a few years ago to do away with the rating system towards a continuous performance management. And as they say, CTO don't drive digitization, or HR did not drive robust work from home or virtual working, but COVID did. The same way, the current situation led to better calendarization and a better offtake of HR monthly performance management. So the point which I'm trying to drive is in the monthly leadership meeting, when financials are discussed, we also started discussing more and more about talent. And that's where the partnership between HR and finance started flourishing, and more so in these times. So that's my overall take, starting from finance and HR to lead an organization towards what they really exist for. So I rest
Thank you.
my
Thank you.
case here,
Thank you,
Dr.
Priyank.
Akil.
I like the way you brought the analogy of Kshitij, the horizon where two seemingly meet. But what I liked most was the way you warmly described the finance function as those who are actually good at HR. And I like that acknowledgement because many HR people make the mistake of looking at their finance counterpart as bean counters. And fortunately, in your case, you were looking at it as a partner to grow the business. So thank you very much, Priyank, for a very good overall view of the partnership that should be there, and it is there in GSK. So may I now move to next panelist, Sandeep Batra. 32 years experience of that, large part of 21 years with ICI. And at one time, ICI was one of the most iconic organization. And in 2015, he moved to Crompton Greaves, consumer electrical, graduate from St. Xavier's College in Calcutta, interested in music, reading, golfing, and comes from Calcutta. So, so over to you, Sandeep sir, for your views.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Aquil, and uh, delighted to be part of this August panel. And obviously, thanks to ET to put this event together. I have a couple of perspectives on this relation between or partnership between finance and HR. But I can't resist, a little bit of showing off. Partnership by definition means that the partners have liability which is joint and several. And this is something which is very important for every partner to understand, that not only if you consider yourself to be a partner, not only are you accountable for your deeds or misdeeds, but by virtue of being in a partnership, you also assume accountability for what your partner does or doesn't do. And that's the level that of maturity that you need to take if you consider somebody to be a partner or to be your partner. And what comes to my mind is, a journey 5 years back. It was 5 years back that I joined Crompton. This was a business which was part of a family-owned industrial conglomerate, was getting spun off via a demerger into a company where private equity was taking over the ownership of the erstwhile promoters. And everybody has their own definition of what private equity is supposed to do. And the only description that comes to one's mind is that they will extract value. And extract value, everybody knows how it comes, cutting cost, whatever. So there were a lot of misgivings in the organization 5 years ago. One of the first tasks that we had as the management team was to put together a strategy. Obviously, all of us understood that the strategy has to be executed in the field, which means you get more consumers to buy your product. But while strategy execution may be the responsibility of the front line, there are two functions which are very key to ensuring that the execution of the strategy is seamless. And these are the two left hand, right hands of the CEO, which Dr. Aquil described as the finance and the HR functions. And that is the way it happened in Crompton 5 years back. It was the finance team which put together, working with all the respective businesses, the 5-year strategic roadmap for the company, which to my mind was relatively easy. It's all some amount of number crunching, some amount of choices to be made of what to do. and what not to do. But I think what I have learned in my years of experience is you can have the best strategy, but if it has poor execution, it's going to be disaster.
No value. No value.
Whereas you have an average strategy, but outstanding execution, you will create delight for all your stakeholders. And that was the approach that we took, that we don't have to have, the best-in-class strategy, but we want the best-in-class execution. And that responsibility in translating the strategy into what is in it for me, and then communicating it to each person in the organization, is something that was done by the finance and the HR function jointly.
Right. So Sandeep, what you have given us is actually a live example of how this partnership really makes a big impact on the organization. So I think what you have mentioned is a practical way this can be implemented. So let me move to quick question answers. Give me very brief, crisp answers. You don't have to give me an explanation, just your off-the-cuff reaction. So let me start with the first question is that HR is viewed by many finance people as expense department. Is this justified? So let me ask Manish Dugar. What's your view, sir?
No, absolutely not.
Quick answer.
If the question is whether it is felt by many like that, probably, maybe, but that is where the difference is between a finance guy and a finance guy.
But do you feel that HR only comes to spend money for the company?
Well, within Mphasis and in my experience across now more than 9 companies, I would say that has not been the case, and it has always been, how do we?
So you love HR
rightly.
department. In other words, you love HR department.
You don't necessarily need to love people to have professional respect.
Okay, Vinod, what's your view, sir?
So I will say it's not the expenditure. It's not, no doubt it is an expenditure, but at the same time, HR creates the value for the organizations. See, human capital is very, very important. And if we have the very talented and skilled human capital, they can create the wonder, they can create the magic. And that's
I
why
hope you guys are not saying this because HR
so it's a P&L account. If I'm creating more value than my expenditure, then net I'm creating the value for the organization.
Sandeep, what's your view, sir?
My view is of every department, every function has a cost, right? I mean, whatever the cost may be, people, processes that you run. I think it is up to the organization to decide what value you get out of that cost. And more importantly, how do you measure the value that each function is creating? And my belief in all my last 10, 15 years of experience as a CFO has been that you set the right metrics for every function. I mean, that way, that could be said about other functions in the organization too. If you set the right metrics, a mix of lead as well as lag indicators, you will certainly see value in.
So are you all 3 finance experts? Are you just being polite?
No, I won't say I'm being polite. As I said, every function has a cost, and it is up to the organization to make sure that you get the best value out of that cost by having the right measure of the effectiveness or the performance of that particular function.
Okay, so let me move to Manish Sinha. Manish, often HR has unreasonable expectations from finance function. Do you agree?
Not really. Even if we have unreasonable expectations, so I would say the way the expectations are explained and we create a sense of buy-in and ownership on what we are trying to drive, it actually is also an accountability of the HR person at the helm of affairs. If you are able to create that, I don't think that's the right perspective to have.
Okay, Priyank, what's your view?
I would say yes, and but if it is customer obsessed, if it is patient obsessed, let it be. So HR will always depend upon finance person for the right matrices, which can really help him or her to think about their patient, customer, and people. At the end of the day, it's not cost; it's about investment. And a smart finance guy, and I've been really lucky. They've always considered it as an investment and they have given that leeway that okay, let's invest ahead of the curve in people, and we will definitely
So,
get the
what,
good results.
what I noticed that you guys are so agreeable with each other that you make a job of a moderator very difficult. But tell me, is it an equal partnership? HR and finance should be equal partners?
Let me answer your first question. That way, every function can be considered to be unreasonable with finance. But it's the finance person responsibility how he strike a balance between their requirement and the organization objective, and move forward for the overall achievement of the goal of the organizations.
Manish, you were saying something, Manish. Sinha?
I was also mentioning about, there are functions like product development, innovation, where you may need a seed capital or seed funding. And I don't see a similar expectation or a similar thing being talked about such functions as much as it is for HR and finance. So that's quite an interesting point.
Angle, yes, I know
Yeah.
you brought it out. Sometimes it's not equal. If you see the panel, there are 3 CFOs and 2 CHR. Okay, so in the interest of time, let
what
me
I
move to
wanted
the last question.
To your point,
Yeah.
Dr. Aquil, what I wanted to say is that, in a marriage and husband and wife, one can always believe that it is equals, but we know who is equal and who is not, right?
Yeah,
So the
it is
only
very
thing
obvious you are working from home and your wife is over here.
I think
So let me
the
come in
only
the interest of
difference,
time. Sorry.
the only difference here is probably this is marriage of equals. And,
Okay.
it is important that it is seen that way.
Okay, so let me move to the last question in interest of time. That in what way, in a very practical way, illustration, an HR and finance can work better together. I know Sandeep and others have given a very good example of life. But going forward, if you were to advise young HR and young finance professionals, what is the way they can work better together? Just very briefly, Vinod?
Let me tell that I think Priyank or somebody told that every functional person, right, whether it is finance function or whether it is R&D or whether it's manufacturing, they have to be HR manager, right?
Good.
So once they become the HR manager, then
they understand the perspective from that angle.
Yeah. So
Sandeep, what's your
that's
view?
how today organization is driving. It's HR. It's not only that. It's the responsibility of HR to create the right kind of atmosphere. It's the responsibility of.
Okay, Sandeep. Any addition to the example you gave in Crompton? Besides that, anything that you like to add? How they can work better together? What's the ingredient?
I think the secret sauce is that both finance and HR functions are still at the end of the day staff functions. They could be CEOs, right hand, left hand, doesn't matter. So if both the functions believe that they exist only because that at the end of the day the company has to sell a product or to service a customer, and their job is to enable that.
Makes it relevant to them.
Yeah,
and like you mentioned that first emphasis. I think in the beginning, Manish mentioned that you and I can have a difference as finance and HR, but at the end of the day, let's take a step back and say what's good for emphasis. And here, emphasis could be Wipro, it could be Crompton Greaves, it could be GSK. Manish, would you like to add something to this discussion about what is that? You use Sandeep's word, secret sauce?
I think for younger professionals, Dr. Aquil, as you mentioned, the secret sauce is to appreciate each other's terminologies, and I'm getting into specifics. There are a lot of terminologies which are thrown both by HR and by finance. Jargons. Exactly. And for younger, not only for younger generation, people who have spent 20 years, 30 years as well, the sooner we understand each other's language and we start talking in that terminology.
Absolutely. Come on the same page.
We are on the same page, helps build trust and confidence.
Okay. So let me end this with requesting each of you, very quick, off the cuff, less than 5 words. What's your mantra for better CFO, CHRO relationship? Priyank?
So to be courage, accountability, and transparency. This just stands out.
Accountability is the word. Manish, Dugar?
Constructive conflict, partnering, not a zero-sum game.
Okay, constructive conflict. You started your Sandeep Jai, what's your view?
Trust and empathy.
Oh, lovely. Excellent. Manish,
Transparent, honest, incredible conversations.
see the commonality. And Vinod, anything to
So
add
yeah,
to
yeah.
this?
So I will say it is the trust and
Trust and yeah.
trust and
So
transparency.
if you notice, and let's end, if you notice the conflict, and I like the word repeatedly Manish Dugar used, constructive conflict. It's actually not a conflict. It's my expertise that I bring on the table. I don't have to agree with you. And when I bring that expertise on the table, and if you give me the perspective from your side, and what Manish Sinha mentioned, that instead of you throwing jargons at me and my knowledge and experience and gray hair or no hair at me, give me logic. And what's good for the company is good for me as well as with a function. So in the end, let me thank each one of you for your candid views. Although you seem to be very agreeable with each other, but I'm not surprised, and not to make lighthearted of it, because the reality is that the conflict is perceived, it's not real. And Kshitij is the word that I think Priyank used, that you
Yes.
seem not to meet, but you do meet. You do meet at a common point, because at the end of the day, we are all committed to success of the organization. So thank you very much for your time and your discussion. It was a pleasure moderating this session. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks
you.
all.